Mr. Malema, you have presented contradictory views, actually. If I've listened to you, I've tried for the last bit. You say, let's have land for the dignity of our people. But how about taking away the hard work of others and taking away their dignity? How does this move us forward as a nation? It just says, you know, let's redistribute the land, but at the same time, let's get the best people on the job. It's not clear where you stand between those two issues. And what do you mean by us and you?
Asking anyone for anything. All I'm saying is that a progressive country is a country that will address the imbalances of the past. There is still you and us. There will never be us for as long as there is no equal ownership of this country. If you have arrived, it's good for you. It's good for you. But you and us refers to the owners of the means of production and those who supply their cheap labor to survive. Majority of our people are going through a lot. And I'm not going to be pretentious and say, it's not taking us forward, you and us. No, there's no us. There's no us. We are fighting to have us. As things stand now, and it's not Malema's problem, it's an apartheid colonialist problem. They divided us. They reserved jobs for you. They reserved economic opportunities for you. 1994 did not dismantle the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. That's why Mr. Santa says there is still an economic apartheid. So in apartheid means we are apart. There's them and us. Deny it. The reality is there's them and us. I want Santin and Alexander to be one thing. To be one thing. But they will never be one thing because Alexandra is for the blacks and Santin is for the white minority. The haves and the have-nots are subjected to that congestion in Alexander. So we will never address the issue of racial division if we do not agree and speak to the reality that we are divided because ownership is racially divided. So I'm not taking any dignity away from anyone. My sister, you have a dignity. We also want our dignity back. We have no dignity. We walk like we are ashamed to be here. Especially now at night. We do not enjoy the streets of Cape Town. Because we know that we are made to feel like we do not belong here. As we walk, we are treated like we are suspects in our own country. So we are not going to be coming here and saying to you, we are nice, we are enjoying it. We are not enjoying anything. We are not enjoying anything. We are still subjects of an exploitation in this country. And exactly this attitude of denialism is the one that perpetuates apartheid. Economic apartheid we have is because you are in denial. No, there's... No, it's good. Emotions must be high because that's what truth does to people. It gets their emotions very high.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Santo, you want to respond to that? And then we've got a question at the back, and then we've got a question here.
Okay. Look, I just want to say, and I really want to say this, that a function like this shows the good side of South Africa. We're at least talking to each other, and it's a start. So you know, just get used to that idea.
Thank you very much. Donovan, do you have a question at the back?
Just get used to that idea.
Came to divide us. So you must never see yourself as being something different from what I am. Otherwise, you are inviting self-isolation. We, the black African majority and the Khoisan, were one thing. And we are the only ones who can speak with authority about the Africa, the continent of African majority. So don't take away, I'm not from Europe. My ancestors are not from Europe. This Africa belongs to Africans, and that's what the Khoisan are. Don't isolate yourself, my sister. This solidarity will help us to defeat colonialist and apartheid legacy.
Thank you very much. We've just got time for 2 more questions. I'm taking 1 question here and 1 question down there.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vuisa Kabaka. I've just got 2 quick questions from the CIC and Mr. Santa. First of all, Mr. Santa, I just want to fundamentally disagree with you around the ability of South Africans to start businesses. You made a couple of examples. And what I'm going to premise my question around is the whole point around economic infrastructure investment in townships in South Africa and the lack thereof in the last 20 odd years in South Africa. So I just want to ask you, what is your take around the inability of the current ruling party to invest in economic infrastructure to enable and unlock? Because again, poverty in South Africa sits in the townships of this country. And yet, that's where we're not creating infrastructure for economic enablement. For the CIC, I just want to say that those who feel it know it in Cape Town. So I do agree with you around some of the sentiments you've already made. But specifically to ask you to comment around 3 core areas that you have not specifically spoken to. One is the Economic Codesa that Mr. Santa speaks of. Your take on the Economic Codesa in the context of what you've spoken about today around those who are enabled and who've had centuries old of enablement in the context of Economic Codesa, the National Development Plan, and the context of what the EFF speaks to around the National Economic Development Plan, and lastly, the fictitious black middle class that we all speak about, that is again fundamentally funded through state-owned infrastructure, whether it's government agencies, it's government companies, or it's government itself, that's creating this fictitious black middle class. I want to hear your comments around that.
Thank you very much.
On the question of entrepreneurs in the township, I have to say that we haven't really started trying to integrate some of the, and I would say there are some brilliant entrepreneurs in the township, but they haven't made it because we have made no attempt to integrate the township economies into the mainstream economy in this country. And that's why Mr. Malema was right that I talk about economic apartheid that we still have in South Africa. And we've got to break down those barriers because this is daily life. As I said, you vote every 5 years, but you live life daily in the economy, and we haven't done anything. And you're quite right. We haven't got the economic infrastructure, and it is, I don't know why, I'm not sure that it's lack of passion about what entrepreneurs can do. Because, as I said, if you look around the world, the people who change your lives are the ones that come up with new products, which, because of technology or whatever, assist us in living better. And I just want to make it so much easier so that those people, and there are plenty in South Africa, can actually have the confidence as well as the financial support and, of course, the open market, and not actually be dominated by big businesses trying to make their prices cheaper and put them out of business. That's why I'm talking about an economic Codesa, because we simply can't go on like this, because we are one of the most unequal societies in the world. And yeah, I don't think we've even started in terms of creating the proper economic infrastructure in the townships for entrepreneurs that can do business everywhere in South Africa.
Thanks. I think we are in agreement about the Economic Codesa. We needed to discuss about the land and how that land can be transferred to all. We needed to also discuss the worker share schemes. We need the Economic Codesa to also deal with localization. Lot of chain stores in the country do not even buy local products. I mean, textile industry used to be something very big, especially here in Cape Town. But it's no longer that big because it has been undermined by cheap products which are brought into the country and sold by some of these chain stores. So how do we buy locally? How do we protect the local industries? And also, we need to discuss, Mr. Santa, about the minimum wage so that we close the wage gap, the apartheid wage gap, the minimum wage, and whether indeed through such intervention we will be in a position to help grow the economy. And the decisions of the Economic Codesa, they have to be binding. They must bind, and then those are the decisions which will inform ultimately legislation and policy which is to be adopted by the state. So it is important that we have that a conversation. And I think we'll have that conversation because this is how it starts. It starts with us. And once we reach consensus through these types of engagement, then we say, how do we formalize some of this consensus that we are reaching through the continuous dialogue that we are having. But if we were to go to an Economic Codesa when we are still far from each other, it will not be a very productive Codesa. We ought to genuinely liberate the mindset of our people and win them over so that they begin to appreciate that it is through genuine, legitimate economic freedom that our people will realize true freedom. The black middle class needs to be politically conscientized and it needs to be politicized because sometimes they confuse being credit worthy with being rich. They do not know the difference. And that's where the banks want them to think that by affording to rent in the suburbs here, what is that expensive one there? Whatever the names. So once they qualify to rent, they think, no, I've arrived. Most of the black middle class found in the white suburbs do not own those properties. They rent them. So they are credit worthy. And being credit worthy means you are a slave of capital for the rest of your life. And you are not going to leave your children any legacy. People are inheriting farms here. Your children are not going to inherit anything because for the rest of your life you have been renting properties. And the NDP is just a reputation of gear. And the NDP says very little about the land question. If you do not address the land question, you have not addressed the fundamentals. You are still playing. You had to confront the elephant in the room. And that elephant is land ownership.
Thank you very much. Mr. Santi, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that the NDP, how many people have read the whole document? It's 400 pages on the internet. It was never summarized into something which, you know, could be for public consumption. We didn't have a video explaining it. We haven't had anything. So the last thing I would like to achieve out of an Economic Codesa is a sort of NDP document which ends up in no implementation because nobody really understands what the challenges are. You've got to have measurable outcomes. I have to say, and I've written about it, the one document which is very emotional and sets out stuff in one page is the Freedom Charter. It really does. And if you actually read it, it's a modern document. So I would love, you know, to start the Economic Codesa by just handing everybody a copy of the Freedom Charter rather than the NDP.
Thank you very much. Folks, I know we've all got, there are so many questions, but we're running out of time. I'm taking one more question here.
Thank you, Marcus Pillay, Consulting Actuary. My first question is to Clem Santa. I take your point about the need for entrepreneurs and we need microeconomic interventions in order to grow the economy. But I put it to you that no non-Western country has ever become a high-income country on the basis of that model. That is not what South Korea did. That is not what Japan did. And they are the only two successful examples of non-Western countries that become high-income countries. So my question to you is that model, although it's good, there's no actual evidence that this is going to work. For Mr. Malema, Comrade Julius, shall I say, my question to you, Comrade, is this. I think the key issue is when you said you don't trust capital. You were talking about the diamond mines and De Beers, and you said you can't trust capital because they will understate the diamonds. I think the difficulty is that on the one hand you don't trust capital, but on the other hand you find yourself in a world dominated by global capitalism. And that the only way to succeed is to deal with global capitalism as it is, not as you would wish it to be. Those are the countries that have been successful. Nyerere tried to nationalize land, it didn't work. Ghana tried to nationalize land and communalize land, it didn't work. So what is the key issue that you have with capitalism, and what do we need to do to persuade you that in this country, with the right restrictions and regulations and with an interventionist state, we can harness capital to turn us into the next South Korea?
Okay, I'll start with the first question that you asked, which is you're quite right to put forward South Korea, because it is what I would call a hybrid model between government and private enterprise, because South Korea is one of the very few countries that's made it into the Premier League of Nations with an income per head of around $30,000 per annum. And it's because they achieved the right balance. North Korea didn't, but South Korea did. And it's an excellent example of the kind of hybrid model that I'm striving to create, because I take a lot of the points that Mr. Malema has said tonight, but I do want to stress that you still need those business people who have creative ideas, and in a sense, I guess my vision about black ownership is that a lot of the black ownership are entrepreneurs running their own businesses, and yes, having employees share ownership schemes as well. I just want the two to go in parallel, because you're quite right, South Korea is an excellent example.
Thanks very much. Well, I appreciate the fact that capitalism dominates and runs the world. But that's not a justification enough for me to trust it, because its obsession is to maximize profit at all costs. Yes. It doesn't matter if that profit puts the lives of people at risk. They will go for it. Yes. So we want a system that will put people first and not profit. Yes. So we are into those types of politics. But you gave examples of countries that tried to nationalize the land and failed, and you came across as one of the well-informed person, and I know that you then deliberately decided not to speak about China, because China owns the land, and then it leases land to private sector, and it is the second largest economy today in the world. So it is not correct that if Nyerere tried it and it failed, it will fail everywhere else. We look at what Nyerere tried and how he went about it and which are the areas that made him fail. And we learn from that and do not repeat such things here in South Africa. In as much as we do not trust capital, we do not wish capital away. All we're saying is that capital must subject itself to the leadership of government. Government must be a leader in the economy, in politics, in social aspects of our lives. In that way, we know that we are not driven by the interest of profit at all costs.
So, well, guys, given the fact that now Malema has given the latest it is evident that you see all these particular things that you had said previously, as far as land being taken back to the Africans that it was taken from the nation, things which were previously the tree, but because right now, as we're talking about, given the fact that the issue of the ANC and the BFF, they're going to be doing all the indignities, all the inequalities, all the persons that are done by the indigenous law, even as time and time again, see a government to advocate for land that is owned by the white minority and privately owned the land and large tracts of this So, guys, as usual, that has always been my opinion. And you drop your comments and let us know exactly what you think the fate is South Africa safe, or it is at the stage of the budget phase and not uncertainties. Because at this point,